Hello and welcome to our Stamp Club. You are now part of a group of amazing women who are on different parts of the country. We have some folks from Iowa. We have people from our Stamp Club from Texas, from Florida, from California, and quite a few from North Carolina. And today we are going to be making a fun project with the Bottled Happiness bundle, which includes a stamp set and a punch and some other fun little elements. So I am going to flip the camera over and we're just going to get going. It's just the easiest way to show this particular project. As I mentioned, the bundle in the new catalog has the Bottled Happiness stamp set. It is a two-step stamp set, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And it is bundled with a punch. And the punch is super fun. It's obviously in the shape of a bottle. And the project that I'm going to recreate is this one, which is just a really pretty bouquet of flowers coming out of a very fun and interactive bottle. You'll see that there are some, they're called Effervescent elements. That whole title just makes me smile. And they really are fun. They're little glass balls and they're 3 different sizes. Anyway, super, super fun. So I'm going to recreate this card and also give you a couple of more tips on how to make a card like this if you don't want to use the domes. Let's start with what you need to make the card. And there are not very many parts. The first piece that I'm going to use is a card base. And I'm using a piece of basic white. It is cut to a traditional A2 size. So it is 8.5 by 5.5. And then it's scored in the middle on the 8.5 inch line, which obviously means 4.25. And that becomes the card base. Then I am going to use one of the new in colors. This is Parakeet Party. And it is one piece of Parakeet Party cardstock. You can see that it's cut to just a little bit less wide, less tall than the card base. And this piece is cut to 4 inches wide by 5.25 inches high. So if you use a piece of cardstock, you can get 4 of these. This is just a little bit smaller than a 1/4 sheet of cardstock. So again, this piece is 4 by 5.25. And then the last piece, if I bring back the example card, the last piece is the focal point, this piece of white that I stamped on. And we're going to start this piece. It's going to be cut a little bit, but we're going to start this piece as a single piece of basic white. And initially, it is cut to 3.75 inches wide by 5 inches high. So when I first started putting this card together, my thought was I was building 3 layers that were going to be concentric rectangles. And I changed it up, as you can see when I finished. So again, we've got the card base, 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4.25 on the 8.5 inch side. One piece of the new in color Parakeet Party, 4 inches by 5.25, and then one piece of basic white that is cut to 3.75 by 5. So every time I'm looking at the sizes of these, I'm really just taking 1/4 inch off to get it shorter and narrower. All right, so those are the 3 pieces. The other elements that I use for this card, I used one of the domes. These are called vintage bottle shaker domes. And they come in a package of 10. They are very fun. and I will be using one of those to recreate this. And I'll show you some, I think, easier ways to put the shaker domes onto cards. And then the last major element that I used are these effervescent elements. And I've already talked about these. These are also in the annual catalog. They look like bubbles. It looks like I'm holding part of, somebody dumped some bubbles from a bubble bath into this container. And they're glass or plastic, and they're just fun. They will make you smile. They're a lot of fun, and I'll be using those. And then the other part of the process will include the punch and the stamps, and to color the stamps and actually get them onto the focal point, I'm going to be using markers. And you could use markers, you can use ink pads. I'll tell you why I prefer to use markers on this particular design when we get into it, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So what I tend to do when I start creating a card is I literally get a stamp set out and I just start playing around. And you can see on this practice sheet that I had, I was using some non-in-color colors. I think this was pale papaya. I was just messing around with it. And the reason I wanted to do that is I wanted to get a template that I can keep. This, honest to goodness, is just going to go right into this stamped case. And if I want to recreate the card, I have a cheat sheet. So you can make your own cheat sheet and keep it in your case or keep it in a stash that you have. And you're going to see why, in this case, it was really, really important for me to keep that cheat sheet. Here's why. I'm bringing in my Stamparatus. And this is one card where I will really strongly recommend that you use a Stamparatus, because it is important to get your designs lined up. You've got a two-step stamp, and let's look at what those stamps are and how they work together. If I bring the stamp case back, we can see that there is a stamp that has the foliage. There's another stamp that has the flowers. And obviously you want to line them up. So when you are stamping one on top of the other, you're filling in the design. You have the middle of the flowers on the one that has the foliage. And you want to make sure that you're getting that in the middle of the flowers on the flower stamp. It is very easy to do this if you have a Stamparatus, because you can first put your flower stamp down, ink that up, and then take your foliage stamp, put your foliage stamp down onto your Stamparatus, onto your plate, pick that up, and you're going to be able to place these exactly where you need them to go. The other thing is, when you've done that, you can get your Stamparatus set up again to recreate a card if you've made a template. So when I first made the example that I'm showing you, before I put everything away, I stamped the two stamps that I'm showing right now. I stamped the foliage one, and I stamped the flower one on here. When I reset up my Stamparatus, I took out this piece of paper, and I have a way to get these two stamps aligned again without any hassle. What I did is I put this piece in, I got my stamp out, I put it exactly where it needed to be on my paper, and I pushed my plate down. I got that stamp onto my plate. I took the other stamp, which is the foliage one, I put that down right on top and I could see exactly where that needed to be. Brought my plate down and picked that up. So I've got a cheat sheet that I can use anytime I want to recreate that bouquet by just pulling this out. It's super, super simple. Let's go ahead and we are going to stamp the image. You may or may not stamp the way that I do on the Stamparatus. One thing you're going to see is I don't tuck the paper into the corner. I want to have a little bit of room over here on my plate that is empty of any stamps. I don't want to have to push in the corner. I find, at least for me, it's easier to pull the stamp out a little bit, and then I can actually do a little bit better in terms of getting the evenness of what I want. These are the foliage pieces. And what I'm going to do for those is I'm going to start off with the Parakeet Party. And I am going to just take my marker and I'm going to lift this off, lift the plate off. And when I use markers on stamps like this, I always use the brush end. It's just easier to get the ink on. And I definitely could take the ink pad if I wanted to. And since I'm using one color right now, the ink pad would do just as well. But later I'm going to come back in and I'm going to put a little bit of color on some of these images, just to give it some depth. So right now I'm just going to add some color. I'm not even honestly worried if I don't get color on all the image. I don't really care because I can come back and I can re-ink and re-stamp and not worry about it because I have that stamp exactly where I want it on my paper. All right, so there I've got the foliage that is showing. And I'm going to do some more on that in just a couple minutes, but I'm also going to, turn this around. And this is where I'm going to start stamping my flowers. With the flowers, there are a couple of different kinds of flowers that we have in here. And if I bring back the example card, let me show you, it's probably easier to see these in colors. I wanted to use several of the in colors. I've got the Tahitian Tide in the middle. I have the Orchard Oasis on some of these really pretty kind of striped looking flowers. And then for the round ones, I used Sweet Sorbet. And because I have a photopolymer stamp that has a lot of different areas in here, and I would do the same thing if it were a rubber stamp, I'm going to use the markers. For me, it is easier to go in with a marker and find what it is that I'm really trying to color in particular colors. And you're going to want to have either the stamped image or an example of where the different colors are so that you have a pretty good idea where you are painting the ink on. And one nice thing about this too is I don't have to worry that the ink is going to dry, because even if it gets a little dry, I can huff on it, literally just use my breath and huff on it and get a little bit of moisture added back in. So I'm going to go ahead and do the red. And I'm just going to kind of stop at that point. And what's nice about this too is I can do this in parts. I don't have to do everything at the same time. So I'm just going to come in and add that red. And I know where I have my paper. I'm putting it right for me right at the end of that little point. So I'm just going to go ahead and if your paper moves when you're doing this, don't worry about it. You can reset it and you're still going to be right back where you need to be. I'm going to take that out and let's really do a bang for the buck one. I know that I want the middle flowers to be in that to be same time. I love this color. It's so happy and bright. It's just a beautiful kind of aqua. Not really not a jade, I don't think. I think it's more than aqua. So I'm just going to go in here, add some color. And what's also nice with the markers is if I wanted to, I can come back in and I can add some other colors to some of the images that I've already stamped, just to give them a little more interest. And the milk petal is perfectly one color. It's always going to have shades of another. And we'll just give it a little bit of an interest if I can do that. But I want to get that first. So I've got my Tahitian tied. Go ahead and put my Tahitian tie down. And you can see what that looks like. It's getting very fun. And I'm going to go ahead and use some Orchid Oasis. You can see I'm also not cleaning the stamp as I'm going. And I'm doing that intentionally. The more ink I get on here, the easier it is going to be for me to lift it off the page. And I'm really not going to worry if I come back in and put different colors on any of the places where the already added color, because all that's going to do is give me some really fun depth. So there we go. We're getting closer. I just want to move my paper, make sure it's exactly where I had it lined up. And now I'm going to go back in and just kind of touch up some of the areas where I've already done some stamping. And this is where if I want to add, let's say I want to add just a little bit of blue on the edge of my red, just to give it, you're going to see, it just gives it this really interesting kind of look. Put that back in. And you'll see that over here where we've got the sweet sorbet, I'm adding just a little bit of blue, and it's really doing some fun things. Now, the one thing about markers is you'll see that in the middle, that Tahitian tide didn't come out exactly the way I wanted it to do the first time. No worries. I can go right back in and I can add more ink. And I'm just going to layer it right on the top. And it will also look kind of fun because it's going to have different depths of that Tahitian tide color. Now, you do not need to go to this level if you want to truly use a layer for your flowers. You could make them all a particular color to start. You could use a stamp pad, do a light color, and then come back in with more colors and just add depth that way as well. There's a lot of ways to do this. So I'm getting closer. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little bit more green. And I'm going to cheat. I feel like slightly guilty, but this is another ink color. And this is Evening Evergreen. And I'm just going to put a little bit of green on some of the foliage, make it a little bit darker just again to give it a little more depth and a little more interest. And you'll see what that does when we pull this all together. And this is one where the more you play, the more you're going to find that you have certain color combinations that you like and that will really give you a bang for your buck. So that's not bad. That is not too bad, although I do want to get the centers of a couple of those flowers a little bit more defined. And then I promise that's going to be the last thing that I'm going to do. So I've got my centers here. I'm going to take out my Parakeet Party one more time. Just do the centers to make sure that the inside of the flowers have a piece that we can all see, so that they're going to look a little bit more distinct. Middle, and then we'll see what we've got. Okay, so there we've got a really pretty bouquet of flowers. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add the bottle. So I'm going to put the stamp apparatus aside just for a minute, and we'll come back to that in just a second. And now I'm going to bring out the punch. And let's really briefly, let's just talk about punches for a second. Punches, as you all know, are ones that can have a single image, like this one, the one we're dealing with. You can also have punches that have multiple images. And obviously the difference is if you use a punch that has multiple images and you punch, you are going to get whatever number of shapes you have punched out of a piece of paper if you use a full piece. With a single punch, and again, this is absolutely obvious, you're going to get a single image when you punch that out. Unlike a die, I can't really maneuver this around on a piece of paper. So if I take a piece of paper, white cardstock, and I put that into my punch, and I put the paper all the way down at the bottom, that bottle is as high as it's going to go on that piece of paper. So if I punch that bottle out, if I try to get that kind of in the middle, I'm eyeballing on the bottom and on the left and the right, and I punch it, I can't move this hole higher on my piece of paper. With a die, obviously I can. So there are limits in terms of punches. Super portable. These are great to be able to use when you travel. And that's definitely something that I do. And I really enjoy that. So let's use the punch to punch out from what we just did. And what we're going to be doing, and I've already put this together, so I know that when I am about in the middle on this piece, and again, I'm eyeballing it from the bottom, trying to get those sides about even, and I'm just holding the piece straight at the bottom. I punch that out, then my bottle is going to be right underneath the bouquet. And you can use your template to figure out exactly, how you want to design where the bottle is going to be. And then you will have something that you can recreate again and again. All right, so what we have now is we have our bottle, we have our bouquet, and we are going to start putting together the rest of the card. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put the shaker on. So what I want to do is I want to be able to put the effervescent elements in. And I also want to capture this. So I will be able to easily get the rest of the card put together without having a complication with the shape of the card. And I'm going to show you the way I do this. It's a little different than the way some folks do this, but I am going to show you. I am actually going to cheat, and I apologize, but I want to have a completely different design so that we know which one color-wise is the example that I did. And then this is the one that I'm working on now. So what I've really done is I recreated a template for myself. And I want to use this one so that we're not getting things overly confused. So let's talk about these domes. They have adhesive on two sides. And if I could peel this off, you can see there's wax paper on the back. So the back is adhesive. And there's also wax paper on the front. And I have to peel it off. So there's adhesive on the front as well. And the reason is, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to adhere that bottle in the area where you cut your hole. And then you want to be able to adhere that to whatever your base is going to be. Okay. All right, that's fine. We can do that. But we're going to do it in 2 steps. And I'm actually going to do one real quick thing before I do the bottle. And that is I'm going to slightly cut the image that I am going to be attaching. If I put that image right up here, you're going to see that when I got done with this, I decided that I wanted the left-hand side to be just a little bit shorter. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. And I just cut off 1/2 inch. I'm going to cut that off. And I do need to do one more thing. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. I do need to stamp my sentiment onto the focal point before I put the bottle in, because I'm not really going to be able to stamp super easily after I have the shaper dome on top. So let me do one more quick thing before I get to the shaper dome. This is going to be super fast. Again, I know where my sentiment is going to go. And I put that onto a plate when the stamp lands. I'm going to bring that over just a smidge and make sure that I have my lined up. And for the sentiment, I'm going to use a ink pad. And for the sentiment, I'm going to use the new Starry Sky. So I'm just going to do that really quickly. It definitely is important to get the stamping out of the way before we start working on the dome. Stamp down, sending a little message, which I think is really just a very, very sweet little sentiment. All right. So having backed up, we are now back to the point where we can talk about the shaper domes. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to attach this shaper dome to the front. I want to be able to put the little effervescent pieces in here. And I want to be able to take this whole mess and stick it onto this piece of paper. Well, here's what I do. And it may be a little unconventional, but it works for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build this up with my little elements. And I'm doing this without attaching it to anything. And I'm going to just lay this down. I'm going to get some of my elements, and you can use, this is for any kind of shaker that has a dome like this. I'm just going to pour some of these in. And you don't want to overcrowd this. It's meant to look like a bottle that has, some little bubbles or stones or whatever you want to call them. And in the bottom when the bottle is vertical. You can sort of see, that's going to look pretty good. And then what I'm going to do, let me tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to peel the back of this adhesive off so that the back of the shaker dome is going to be sticky. And I'm going to put a piece of designer series paper right on the top. And that way I will have an enclosed shaker dome. And that's what I did here. I have a piece of designer series paper behind this. And that was the first thing that I did. So then I've got this enclosed piece that I don't have to worry about if anything's going to fall out. If the world is gonna, it's just easier rather than trying to get everything lined up and perfect. So now I've got this little shaker. I measured the size of the shaker and I cut a piece of designer series paper that was a little bit wider. This is 2 inches by 3 inches. Now I could try to lay this piece down. This has vertical stripes. I could turn that over and try to get that straight. And that's what I did on this one. But for the example, I'm going to use this side to show in the back of the bottle. So I'm going to flip this over and I'm just kind of eyeballing, making sure that I'm going to capture that dome underneath. And I'm putting that piece of paper right on the top. And now look, that's not going anywhere. That is going to be so simple to now put onto my card. I don't have to worry. This is what a lot of folks do. They attach the bottle from the front, they flip it over, fill stuff up, and then they're going to take a piece of cardstock and try to get it lined up. I'm not going to deal with that because it will never be lined up the way I want it to be. And I've captured everything that I need to. Now I can take the front wax paper off. It's sticky. I can take my focal point and I am going to lay the focal point right over the top. Now these ones you want to use a fingernail or a scoring board or something and just give it a nice little push right around, all the way around. And there I've got my bottle and it's all enclosed. Easy, easy, easy. And you will not swear at these things and they will work beautifully. And then to finish off the card, if I want to mimic it like I did the other, I'm going to attach these 2 pieces together and they will go onto the card front. Before I put those 2 pieces together, I wanted to do just a little bit of fun scoring. So you'll see that on the piece of Parakeet Party, I did 4 score lines and I purposely off-centered the focal point. I'm going to mimic that. So I'm just going to take the Parakeet Party away. And I've done this a lot, so it's nothing magical. From the end, it's 4 inches. I'm going to go in an 8, score, another 8, score, another 8, score, and 1 more. I've got my 4 score lines. And then, kind of hard to see on camera, but on the left side of the focal point, I wanted to kind of mimic. So I've got 2 lines over here. So I'm just going to take my focal point piece and I'm going to go 1 and 2. So now we have all the pieces together. We have our card base. We have the frame. And we have the front. And we can put everything together. And you can use whatever kind of adhesive you like. Combo is what I'm going to use. And I highly recommend, if you have something like this, that you put this piece on last. Don't put it on your frame and attach these two together. Let's do the frame by itself. And then we're going to add the shaker piece last. It's just easier. It will not make you as crazy. All right. So I'm just going to put a little glue in here. And just like normal, double check that my card base is opening the way I want it to. Make sure I have my score lines on the right side. And just get that centered. I'll go ahead and turn that over and give it a little bit of a varnish. And then I'm going to add this piece. And what's really nice about this is when I put this on, when I put this piece on, I have an option. I can put a little bit more adhesive on the back of that piece of designer series paper, just to be super safe and make sure that there is no way that those little beads are going to escape. All right, so I've got that piece all done. And I'm just going to put that there one on the card. And then the last thing that I would do is put a little bow either on the neck of the bottle. This is the Simply Elegant trim, and it's popped on with a glue dot, and it's just kind of sitting right there on top. So that's a way to get the bottle filled with the effervescent elements and to have a really fun image on the front. Now, what if you don't have the domes? What if you would love to create something that looked like this? Maybe you have a punch that is in the shape of a vase, similar to this punch. Maybe you have a die. A die would work beautifully. A die will give you even more freedom to figure out where you want to put the image of the bottle. If you have a rectangle, you can also make that into a vase. I mean, how many vases are just big cylinders? That would be super pretty also as a vase. So use your imagination. I will bet you that in your stash, you have something that you will be able to use to create a similar thing to what we have here. Shaker domes are great, but let's be honest, they also add a lot of height. I have my thumb underneath where that is in my finger, and you can see there's a lot of height in here. So if I try to tuck this into a regular envelope, it's not going to fit incredibly well. And that's a concern, honestly, that I have of sending these through the mail. I tend to either hand deliver these or tuck them in with a gift, and they're perfect. But what if you wanted to make something that looks like this, but is not a shaker dome? Let's talk about that, because there are ways to do it. And I'm going to create one with the other piece. Let's talk about that. Here we have essentially the same thing. We have our punched out image, we have the stamped image, and what we want to get to is something that looks like and acts like a shaker card. Well, there are options. This is one option. what I have here is a stack of punched out shapes that I have literally glued together. I think there are 5 here. So what I did is I got some scrap paper. I got my punch. I punched out a bunch of the same shapes on several pieces of paper. And then I just started adhering them one to the other. So I ended up with several pieces that were adhered together. I'm going to add one more and just give you a couple of quick tips and tricks if you wanted to do this. So I've already glued 5 together. I'm going to add one more on the top. And when I do this, I don't want to get glue really close to the punched hole. And that's because I don't want to risk getting any glue on the pieces that I'm going to add in the middle that will simulate a shaker. And then I'm going to, in this case, I'm adding a 6th piece. And just add that in. And what I do is I pick up the stack and I put my fingers on the inside. And I just try to get that image lined up. So now I have 6 that are lined up and they're giving me a nice bit of height. And what I will do is I will trim off the piece just a little bit. I want to make sure that when I add this to the card, that the stack of paper is not going to show on the bottom of my card. So you'll see if I put this stack, the bottom of that hole is not, the paper is not going all the way down to the bottom. So when I look at it from the side, I'm not going to see that stack in here. So what in the world am I going to do with this? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to take a piece of clear plastic. This is almost an acetate sheet. It's not quite as thick as acetate. And it is from a package of embellishments that I bought. Please don't ask me which ones, because honestly, I don't remember. But what I'm going to do first is I am going to make this focal point like a shaper card. And that means that I need to take some of my plastic film and put it in the back. I need to attach it so that the first thing that anyone will see is going to be this piece of film. And again, I kind of took my ruler and said, all right, I need a piece that's about 2 by 3. And I'm just going to cut out a piece that's about 2 by 3. And that way I'm going to have enough to cover that hole. So the piece that I just cut is big enough to cover that hole. I'm going to turn the focal point over. So I'm just flipping this over. And I'm actually going to use some tear and tape. It's just a little bit easier. You don't have to, you can use glue. And I am going to get an idea of the size of the piece that I have and where I need to put that tear and tape. And I'm just going to add some of that. And this is a nice way to be able to control how big your shaper card is, how thick it is, and you get all the little pieces inside. And a nice thing about it, which is a little different than when you build a shaper card with that foam adhesive, is I don't need to get it all the way around just where the bottle shape is. Because right now what I'm caring about is I want to be able to attach my piece of film, that clear film that I have. If you can't, grab your scoring tool, give it a good little press, some kind words. Let your nails go longer than mine, and then you'll be able to get it off. Just have one more right at the top. Okay, so I have my tear tape around all the sides, and I'm just going to try to come up from the top. I'm going to lay this down so I'm sure that I've got all the sides enclosed. And if I have tear tape that's exposed, I'm good. I don't care about that. That's fine. Okay. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to attach my little, this is going to turn into kind of a box. So that's going to go right in here, right like that. And then if we flip it over, we can see where we're going. We're going to have this box underneath that is going to allow us to put some shaping pieces on the inside. And the best way to get the box attached, again, is with some tear tape. And you want to just be sure that when you put this down, that it's going to stay. It's going to include whatever kind of shaping elements you want it to have. And you just want to make sure that you get it nice and adhered down. And you can do this with any shape. It looks kind of cool if you have, let's say, a star or something. It looks really neat if you've got a shape that goes along with the overall design that you are putting together. So again, take a look at your stash, because I guarantee you have dimes or punches. You can use letters. You can put somebody's name together and make it a shaker card. And it would be really fun. It'd be really great way to personalize, a birthday card, or this time of year, a graduation card. And it does take a minute or two, but it's worth it. One of our granddaughters is graduating high school next month. And some ideas, I haven't yet put them together. And I have some ideas of what I will do. I will do a shaker card with each of the letters in her name in a separate shaker. So I'm almost there. Just trying to get this one last piece, and then I promise it's not as painful going forward. Okay. I'm going to actually stand up so I can see how this is going straight down. Not be directly on the camera. Just putting that right down. And now if I flip that piece over, I have a bottle. And then what I can do is kind of mimic what I did with the dome. So let's bring the dome back in. And you'll remember that when I did the dome piece, I added shaker elements. The only thing that you need to be careful of when you do this kind of shaker card is that the height of whatever you're putting in, you need to be able to enclose. I'm going to use the designer series paper again. So I just need to be sure that whatever I'm putting in there is not going to be higher than the thickness of what I have. And I thought it would be fun to use a different option. And I just went into my stash. I had these from a project that Stampin' Up! Had years ago. I thought they looked kind of fun. So maybe I'll use that. These are from my Heart Faceted Gems. They would be fun. I'm not sure if the color is exactly. Let me try that. And then you can always go for sequins because they're nice and flat and they're going to work really well. But I think I may do a little bit of a combination. So I'm going to put in a couple of these and I'm just trying to make sure that I put my designer series paper on the top. Yeah, that's going to work. They're not too tall, so that will work. So that would be kind of fun. So we'll have a couple of those. I'm also going to turn them over so the faceted parts is going to show on the front. And then to give it a little more fun, I'm going to add, again, I don't know what you would call these, but tiny, it's almost like sugar. All right. And now we are ready to put the designer series paper on the back. And I'm going to take a shortcut here. I'm going to use blue. I'm not going to go super close. I just want to make sure that I get a good perimeter of blue so that my designer series paper is going to sit on that well. And I'm going to use a side that is not a pattern that I care whether it's completely up or down. Let's give that a nice burnish. And as I'm doing that, I'm really sort of moving those elements around underneath. And this is going to be a surprise because I have not seen what this is going to look like either. And then because I really want to make sure that they're not going to go anywhere, I've got tape. And I will take this. That will be one more safeguard. That means that stuff is just not moving. And it will also seal in the glue. And I usually glue and tape on something like this just to be super safe. And bottom, and then we're going to put the fun reveal. And it's either going to be super cool or it's going to be a mess. So we will see. And turn it over. Well, that's kind of fun. So you've got these little faceted gems that are part of the shaker and also the pieces that are the sugar. And when I put my hand on the depth of this kind of card versus the shaker down, this is much, much thinner. That would definitely fit into an envelope without any issue. It would go through the mail without a problem. So that's another way to create something very, very similar to what we created with the shaker dome itself. And again, I invite you to look around your stash, see what you have, see what you can use to make some of these elements. And you don't have to have all the supplies. I bet you have something that you can use that would allow you to create one of these. And let's have fun with it. It really is a lot of fun. The domes are very fun. They are a little thick for mailing, but they definitely are very, very unique. And I will be playing with them some more. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope you will try it. And again, look around, see what you have, because I know you have something that you can use. And Inky hugs and see you soon.